Hi, Grace. Welcome back to Awaken and Align. It's so good to have you here.
So good to have be back, Laura.
And I love that you have your artwork behind you. You have the magician and a dragon. Please tell us why those two.
Yeah, so I'm actually starting to record my own podcast, and each episode or every other episode is features a tarot card. And I thought the dragon from the Cosmic Creatures deck paired well with the magician card.
I love it. So you switch them up.
Yes. So
Oh.
ideally, you'll know whatever card I'm on by whatever the artwork is behind me.
So I don't know if you remember this, but when we first met and did the first episode on this podcast, I told you that the magician was my favorite in your deck. Because I love the pink hair, and you said that you modeled the pink hair after your like pink hair phase.
Yeah, so I snuck myself in the deck, and I did the same thing with my dog with the Cosmic Creatures deck because my dog is modeled after the dog card in that deck. But yeah, at the time, I had pink hair and I wanted to encapsulate myself in the deck somehow, and that's kind of like a little sneak peek or a little tidbit of this creation process. And I would put my hair in a bun, like how you would see in the magician card.
Mhm.
Also, one of my birth cards is the magician card. So I just wanted, I have a
Oh,
special relationship with that card too.
yeah, my card is the chariot.
Nice. Does that resonate with you?
Yeah, it really does. It didn't before, but also my North Node is in Cancer and the chariot is a Cancer card, so it like definitely, and my life path number obviously is a 7. So it's like, yeah, it
Love
makes
that. That's like a guiding compass for you.
totally. Lead with my heart and my emotions.
Yeah, but also like bravely and courageously too.
Exactly. So the last time we spoke, well, obviously you're the creator of Mystic Mondays, this magical, I guess, enterprise, empire of um, mystical cards and divination tools. And you had almost launched your animal oracle, and now you're on your third deck or fourth deck.
This is my fourth deck, the Astro Alignment deck.
Thank you, by the way, for gifting me with this. It's so beautiful, and I cannot wait to show everybody um, on one of my channels the cards that you made. But what was the inspiration behind this one?
Yeah, so this is astrology based, and I think in a similar way with how I approach all of my decks is hoping to demystify some of it for whoever's interacting with it. So, similar to tarot, I know a lot of people get intimidated by all the cards and all the meanings and how to interpret them. And with astrology, I feel like there's a lot of technical terms that can trip people up. And so I'm hoping that with this deck, it can be both an educational tool, but also a way for people to connect to astrology in their own way.
Mhm. I love that, and they're so beautiful. How long does it take you from like you have this idea that you want to start this deck to then drawing everything and like illustrating everything then to completion? That must be a long process.
It takes me about a year to make a deck. And I've lately kind of been pumping them out every
I
year.
know. I'm like, wait, but since I met you, you've pumped out 4.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the interesting thing is also because I've worked with a publisher for all of these, that it does take longer when you have to work with a publisher because they have their own team, they have editors, and they also have their own marketing schedule and like the best times to launch. So I'm also working with their team on that. But in terms of the creation process, which I do have more control over, I would say I'm always brimming with ideas. Like I
Mhm.
probably have a list of like 10 other decks that I want to create. It's
Mhm.
more about the time to do all of them and choosing which project is calling me the most. So I would say maybe like, and each deck is different because the artwork involved is different. So for example, with the astro alignment cards, there's a lot of like 3D symbols, and I would say that is a little bit more I would say simpler to illustrate
Mhm.
versus I think the Cosmic Creatures card, like this dragon behind me, that takes around like I would say 4 hours per card.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, I feel like for the Astral Alignment deck, it was actually pretty easy for me to do all the illustrations because they were generally simpler. And then the writing part like activates a different part of my creative brain. And
Mhm.
it's just really interesting because like I feel like when I design, and that's what my background is, I can just kind of like zone out and I can just knock it out and do it. And generally it takes me about a month to finish all of that. And then the writing part, I all the lights have to be off. I have to be in the dark. It has to be quiet, no noise, just me and my screen. And so it's just like a completely different creative process, and that sometimes can trip me up.
Mhm.
Um, I like to knock out one part of the process first, meaning I usually like to approach the design first because that's what I'm comfortable with.
Mhm.
And then the writing part is what I tackle next.
Mhm.
And then when you work with a publisher, you just hand in the files and they do their thing. We go back and forth with the editing process, and eventually the deck comes out.
Mhm. So, like, for example, that dragon behind you, like, what inspired you to use those kind of colors? Like, what do you tap into?
Yeah, so for this dragon in particular, I think I was tapping into also what the card means. So there's a certain like majestic quality about dragons, a longevity. And so I think the color red really communicates that. I also feel like I use color in a way where I'm hoping that people who don't know anything about mysticism or whatever, they can just use their intuition to intuit the messages in front of them. So red can often communicate something different than, let's say, a blue dragon does.
Mhm.
So I think red also is associated with the element fire, which is also associated with what dragons use as their, I guess, weapon of choice.
Mhm.
So I feel like some of it, can be conscious choices like that. And then some of it might just be like, okay, well, I think this communicates this message in a way where most people will understand it.
Yeah. Because you're an Aries too. So we're both
Yeah.
like our birthdays are 4 days apart, so but different years. And um and most people don't think of Aries to be like creative people, but we are. We're the fi like cardinal fire, and cardinal fire starts things and initiates things. And I'm always so interested in hearing how other Aries suns like their creative process, because for me it's like really easy to think up things like you said. Like it's really, I have like 1,000 ideas, but to actually sit myself down and like do it for the long haul, I have like no patience. So I'm like, how do I sustain this fire in a long period of time? Because then I just get distracted and I'm like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore.
Well, you have a lot of fire in your chart from what I remember.
Yeah.
I have a Pisces moon, and I think that helps.
Oh, that really helps.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, and growing up, I resonated more with the Pisces sign than I did with Aries, but as an adult, I definitely resonate with the sign Aries. But I think the Pisces moon is very much like helps me activate this dreamy side of myself. So like even when I do have dreams, they tend to be vivid. I mean, I don't remember all of them, but when I do, I do remember them being quite vivid. I tend to write them, and I feel like for me it's always been easy to access that side of myself, and then I tend to forget it's not that easy for other people because it's so natural to me.
Yeah.
And so I think part of this too is just like noticing what your natural gifts are and tapping into them.
Mhm. The Pisces moon just explained everything. I'm like, you just need to tap into your moon and you're like there to a different reality.
Yeah. So what do you think about people feeling more like their moon signs as a child?
So I actually think it's like in astrology, it's like if you're a night chart or a day chart. So I'm a night chart. So technically my luminary is my moon. So I'm more like my moon. I don't know if you're born in day or night.
Born in
Um,
the
oh, day for you? Yeah. But I think like our moon is like our memories from past lives, it's our instincts, it's our like body. And so I know a lot of people that resonate more with their moon sign than their sun sign because our sun is our ego and how like brightly we shine that out. And I think that like what you just said about your Pisces moon makes so much sense. Like I should have just started there.
Yeah, well, I feel like as an adult, like I definitely have harnessed my sun a lot more and have embraced it a lot more. And even now when I'm like thinking back as a child, there were times when I was brave when I didn't have to be. But yeah, it's just that's the thing about astrology.
Mhm.
There's so many aspects to it, so many layers. It's not just like your sun sign this, and there's just like where your north node is and how, you resonate with your Cancer north node and the Chariot card. And that's kind of why I feel like when I approach these decks, it's like different topics
Mhm.
because I feel like they all intermingle.
They do, for sure. And I love what you just said because I think as Asian women, if I could just put a stereotype out there, there is a stereotype that Asian women are docile and quiet and like sensitive and they don't like challenge authority, but I think being Asian American women and being entrepreneurs, I think the Aries really helps us to like speak up for ourselves and to kind of like stand in our authority and our agency because I don't like that stereotype. That's never been me, by the way.
Same. It's never been me. It's something I fought against really hard. And then there's this sense of like, well, why am I being punished for this? Or why don't I belong in this culture that is telling me to almost like abandon parts of myself, or this part of myself that wants to be more, I would say more of an authority in my own life, in making decisions, in not people pleasing, in having autonomy. And I think as in my experience as an Asian woman and growing up with my family, there's very much a group consciousness versus an individual consciousness. And I think that's part of the cultural difference between growing up in America versus growing up in Asia. And I mean, I've definitely felt that internal battle within myself. And sometimes I'm like, maybe my Pisces moon and my Aries sun are fighting each other, But I think part of that is just like building that fortitude within oneself by getting to know oneself. And I think like these tools like tarot and astrology and whatnot have really helped me just understand myself better because you're told all of these like conflicting ideologies. And I think growing up, I was just confused as to what to believe in.
Mhm. Like ever since I was a little kid, my parents have always said, "You're such a bitch and you're so selfish." But it's like, am I though? Or am I just putting up my boundaries? Like, am I a bitch if I say no because I don't want to like follow you and do what you tell me to do? Am I selfish that I don't want to go to this like family gathering that's incredibly toxic? Like, it really depends on how you look at it, right?
Yeah, I resonate with that so much because um being back with my family or around my family as an adult, I've also had to place my boundaries. And I initially felt selfish too because I kind of feel like being around them reintroduced a lot of the childhood trauma of not having choices, of having to follow without questioning, or if you questioned, you got punished, in some way. And I feel like there was a period where I also felt really selfish and guilty for maintaining my boundaries. But as time went on, you kind of have to realize like, well, I'm doing this for me, and the relationship that I have with myself is the one that I want to cultivate at this moment. And sometimes the influences in your life, while they have um I suppose your best interest, but sometimes not. I think that most people have their best interests at heart, and their relationship to you is more so a reflection of themselves, if that makes sense. So if you're not feeling seen or heard in an environment, sometimes the best scenario is for you to exit and to take care of yourself.
Exit left. Do you feel more pressure as a creator or an artist? And I know you like have been doing this for a really long time, but do you feel pressure from your family to like be successful at it?
I definitely did. And then I realized that I need to define what success means to me because whenever I search for success in a way that society has defined it for me, I always fall flat in a way, or it was never enough. Or so, for example, my first deck, the Mystic Mondays Tarot deck, was published, and I don't even think I celebrated. I think I got sick actually. So, and that's, I think, something, speaking to like your higher limits
Mhm.
or what you believe you can do, or, but I find that the external success doesn't actually mean anything if you don't feel like that sense of worth within yourself. So I think a lot of this, like I do feel like I can produce things, you know, but I feel like part of this transition for me is valuing myself as a person
Mhm.
and being okay with who I am versus what I can do, which I think speaks to a lot of people's experiences of like finding who they are outside of their vocation and outside of what society deems as valuable.
Mhm. Which, by the way, your Mystic Mondays tarot deck is like a huge success. Like, I see it everywhere and I see other people using it. I'm like, that's my friend Grace made that. It's wild how so many people have it. Does it ever like blow your mind? Like, oh my God, I made that.
I think I'm desensitized to it, but I think it's cool. Like, I think the best part for me is seeing how other people use it in their practice or how it's impacted their own lives. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this on the last podcast, but when I did the Kickstarter, most of the decks actually ended up being damaged, and that's why I reached out to a publisher.
Mhm.
And within 3 weeks, a publisher picked it up, and I had a literary agent, and it happened really quickly. And this is not normal in the publishing industry, but they published it the same year. Like usually, it can take like a full year for something to come out, and that to me told me that this tarot deck wanted to be out in the world, and it kind of had a life of its own already. And that's I think really rewarding for me because I created it with my own intentions of like, hey, if I'm feeling like this, if I'm feeling like I am not finding a tarot deck out there that I'm really resonating with, and wanting to a colorful, friendly deck, um, and also wanting to learn the cards on a deeper level myself, like there's probably someone else that out there that feels the same way.
Mhm.
And I think that's what resonates with people, like they can find themselves through these cards. Like, so for example, like a detail in the Mystic Mondays Tarot is all the faces are blank generally, except for the lips.
Mhm.
And that's intentional because I didn't want to put features on the faces because I wanted people to see themselves in the cards.
Mhm.
Ultimately it's your own relationship that you connect with the cards through, and I'm glad to be like the channel or the artist and be able to create something like this for other people to then take and run with. I think that's like honestly my favorite part when I was showing people like the free, because this wasn't officially out yet, the astro alignment deck, and I was letting friends play with the cards, and then they were just doing their thing, and it was just like really cool to see how other people would use the cards outside of like what I had originally intended.
Mhm. I love that. Yeah, I love, well, for those of you who could see the video, that's the Mystic Mondays tarot deck, and I've used it so much that the like metallic foil is coming off from the sides. But it's like my favorite tarot deck just because I resonate so much with the colors and how vibrant they are. And yeah, the magician, the one that's behind you, like I don't know, there's something about it that makes me feel magical, like you said.
That's right, because you are
Thank
magical.
you. Thank you. I'm going to receive that compliment. So the last time we spoke, in person because we've hung out. We were trying to think of how many times we've actually like hung out in person IRL, because we actually met during the Panini, the Panorama, and you were like kind of in the midst of your spiritual journey, and obviously we still always are, right? And you were doing Reiki, and you were like studying yoga, and you were in the midst of this like I guess life change. So, what have you been up to and what's been going on in your life since then?
Yeah, so I feel that Mystic Mondays and creating Mystic Mondays had unearthed something in me in terms of like a healing journey and coming back to my true self. And I do feel like I am in a transitional period where I'm entering a new phase of life, and I can't speak to that yet because I don't know what that looks like yet. But I can say that for the past, I would say 5, 6 years, or even before that, I really was searching for my purpose. So before Mystic Mondays, I would freelance graphic design at different places. And I remember feeling very frustrated because I knew there was something more for me, and that what I was doing at these workplaces wasn't what I was meant to do. But I didn't know what it was yet. And I already had an interest in tarot, and energy healing and all of that stuff. But it wasn't until I made the Mystic Mondays Tarot was when I started to pursue different certifications. So breath work, I finished till level 3. And I love facilitating breath work. I just did one workshop this past Saturday, and I'm also certified in Reiki, master level Reiki. Um, I feel like I'm certified in a bunch of things at this point. Also yoga, hot yoga, yin yoga. I feel like something that I love to do is to learn. And that also, I think, relates to what I learned in my graphic design education, is how to concept an idea and also how to bring it to execution. So that is something that I brought with me, and I do love that process of just creating things. I think at the heart of, who I am and what makes me tick is just the practice of creation. And I think what I'm coming to is almost like detaching myself from the outcome, because I think that's what trips a lot of people up, and me as well, in that I it doesn't actually matter what other people think. Like, I'm so happy and glad to hear that you love Mystic Mondays Tarot, and that is your journey with the Mystic Mondays Tarot. I received the compliment and the praise, but I also am just like, I'm almost like detached from it.
Mhm.
Because it doesn't, like, because it shouldn't matter if someone hates it or if someone loves it.
Mhm.
Whereas, like, I'll get compliments like from you, Laura, but sometimes I'll get these random hate comments and emails and blah blah blah, and that's not fun either. And of course that tends to sting a little bit more. But I think when you receive almost like polarizing comments, uh it tends to put you in a practice of solidifying your own self-worth, so that no matter what anyone says to you, you still have that source of strength.
Mhm. I love what you just said because that was like the epiphany moment I had during Pisces season, which is still like happening right now. That what you were just saying about detachment, like whether somebody loves what you're doing or not, sure, the lovely notes are such an ego boost, and who doesn't like that? But ultimately, it doesn't matter. If you're just walking in your purpose and you're doing what you love and you're enjoying life, then you should just continue living on, believing in yourself.
Yeah, I feel that, we're very conditioned to look outside of ourselves for feedback, reassurance that we're on the right path. And I think we can look to that to an extent. But for example, if you're starting something from nothing, you don't have that feedback yet. So you really do have to rely on your own source of fortitude. But oftentimes that takes time to build up. So I suppose with all these certifications and all the things I pursued over the years, it was really a finding of myself, of strengthening my own resolve so that if a hate comment comes in, I'm much more able to handle that now than I was like 4 years ago. You know, I think 4 years ago it would have rocked me really hard. I would have gotten really upset. Um, but now it's almost like, well, I don't even know that person and they don't know me, so it doesn't matter. And also, if you are creating something from the heart and if you really believe it's like part of your purpose, and if you really connect to the reason why you're doing something, so for me, like Mystic Mondays has a much larger mission than myself. And I think that also allows me to detach from certain outcomes. So for example, like I really do feel like these tools will really help people heal themselves and to grow and to gain awareness over their subconscious and triggers and shadows. And it's just another modality for people to gain more awareness. And I do believe that. And I think connecting to that purpose helps me almost be like the channel, but also be like detached from it because that's also their journey. Like I'm not there for, I can't physically be there for every person facilitating their healing journey. That's also, you know, in some ways the responsibility of the person who chooses to be on that journey. But I mentioned that because I think it's helpful for people to understand that I think oftentimes the thing that stops us is our own like connection to what people think of us, our self-judgment or criticism, but also like when we focus the attention so much on ourselves, we forget about our larger, like the larger reason we do something. And if I didn't have this larger reason with creating Mystic Mondays, if like the first hard thing happened, like for example, all the decks getting damaged, that could have been it. Like I wouldn't have kept going. But since I do feel like the larger purpose helps me keep going no matter if the times are challenging or also rewarding, which honestly I feel like in proportional to like percentage wise, it's mostly more challenging than actually rewarding.
Mhm.
So I
Totally.
think that's something people, you know, can remember, but also like if you really want to do this, you're going to be tested. And this, whatever this means to you, but I feel like the larger purpose helps, you know, everyone move forward in a way. And I think some, you know, you spoke about the North Node earlier. If people don't know what their purpose is, I think looking at astrology and your North Node in midheaven can be really helpful in discovering what that is. So mine is in Aquarius, and I do feel like the things that I'm doing right now and just in exploring, you know, having created the Mystic Mondays app as well, I think uh that is also within my realm of
Mhm.
what I'm moving into.
Yeah. I love, oh, there's so much you said that I loved, but yeah, for sure. That's why I believe in astrology so much because it's your blueprint. It's like if you don't know what your purpose is, I'm just gonna like give you a like quick, just like spoiler alert, your purpose is just to be yourself. And I know that sounds very vague to some people. Like, whenever I work with clients and they're like, help me find my purpose. And I'm just like, it's literally just to know yourself and like express that out to the world. And the way in which you do that is by asking yourself, what do you desire? What lights you up? What do you love? But like you said, people look outside of themselves to define who they are. So they look at social media, they look at what everyone else is doing to, and they think that, and they really believe that that's what they want. Meanwhile, they haven't pointed that energy inward and asked themselves like, what is it that I want to do, even if I would never get paid for it, or if I got paid millions and millions of dollars, that I would do for free? What, how do I want to spend my precious time here on earth? And of course, like, not everybody has the luxury of time because we live in late stage capitalism and everyone's working. But I think that was the gift of the pandemic, was that And not everybody had that time off, obviously. We had frontline workers, but that was the time when we were supposed to like look inward and ask ourselves these important questions. And it just so happens that some of us are able to figure that out, through trial and tribulation, through the dark night of the soul.
Oh my God, so many dark night of the souls. And I do feel like the pandemic was a collective dark night of the soul because so many people were disrupted out of their routines and had to really like lean into like, does this feel good? Like, does this job feel good? Am I fulfilled? Like, am I happy where I'm living? Like, I feel like all of these reflective questions came up that usually people could ignore through the busyness of their lives, which often can be a distraction.
Hmm. And I would say that a lot of people that I personally know, which I'm not necessarily around them anymore, they would ask themselves these questions and know the answer, but continue going on because people are afraid of change.
Oh, yeah.
It's like that saying, the devil you know.
I don't know that saying, but I do believe you.
Yeah. It's like the devil you know is obviously like you would rather do something that you hate because you know it and it's like something that you can expect rather than risk it all and go into the unknown, which, if I'm being honest, is what life is all about. Like we don't know anything. Everything can change in a moment, which it has.
Right. Yeah. And even just like subtle things, like you might, like, for example, like if you had asked my college self, would you be making tarot cards and all this, I'd be like, what? That would have a thought form back then. But I do believe that every life scenario prepares you for the next level.
I do.
So, like my childhood, with parents who were refugees and, like not knowing English necessarily, or, I feel like that informs my experience. And then also being a creative child, but not necessarily having parents who understand that
Mhm.
because everyone was in survival mode, or and then going to college and getting a graphic design education then brought me to LA because that was my first job out there, and so like it goes on and on. But I feel that if anyone does feel a bit discouraged about or confused about what they want to do, um, I feel like looking back at what you enjoyed as a child is like a huge clue.
Yes, for sure. So in my case, I just loved being outside all day because I was a latchkey kid. And I literally asked my mom, like, was there anything that I wanted to be or do? And she said, no, you spent all of your time outside in nature. And I was like, great.
That's
How do
amazing.
I make that a career?
I will go on any hike you facilitate.
Well, another thing she did say was I would always get into trouble by talking too much in school. So clearly I was meant to talk for a living. Um, And I also think like the education system in the United States, which is a whole different topic, it suppresses our natural gifts. So like if I was fostered as a child for being a little chaotic and weird and like talkative, then maybe I would have done this earlier, but who knows, you know?
Right. Yeah. I feel like we're almost taught to go against our impulses
Hmm.
and like punished when we do. And
Yeah.
instead of like cultivating curiosity, it's almost like discipline.
Hmm. Be
But I don't know.
quiet. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Behave yourself. Like, stop moving, stop disobeying. They wanted us to be these, like, very quiet, docile, like, zombies.
And a lot of the schools look like prisons.
They do. They do.
Yeah, with all the security and gated, parking lots and whatnot. Um, but I think things are changing now
I hope
because
so.
it's a whole different generation having grown up with like a pandemic and mass shootings, and I feel that there is a shift even in how people are how they perceive authority.
Mhm.
I just generally feel like people are a little bit more wanting to be autonomous and wanting to think for themselves.
So, like, there's two things that I wanted to say. One was the voice note I left you this morning about Aries. So, like, let's put a pin on that. But the second thing is, I actually heard a tarot reader say, because I watch a lot of tarot readers on YouTube, and she said that as souls, we really needed to be convinced to come here on Earth because why would you leave, like, why would you want to leave like unconditional love, oneness, and like the Garden of Eden, right? Like Earth is hard. Earth school is difficult and it's slow and it's like painful. And so we have to be convinced here through music and art. And that's the only way that like us as souls would come here. And I find it interesting because music and art, and I just don't only mean like the traditional being a painter or a musician, right? But the way in which that reminds us of our oneness and like how creative we can be. And those are the programs that get cut first in like education systems. But those are the things that we need as humans.
That's so true. I was in a high school that cut the art program. And I know my identity was already so rooted in being like the artsy kid.
Mhm.
But I feel like if you're persistent enough, you'll find alternatives because I did end up like finding like Saturday programs that was sponsored by the school district and stuff like that. Not to say that everyone has the same type of, opportunities, but I do feel like there's a will. When there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, like the soul finds a way. They find you find your like crevices of inspiration.
Yeah, and I agree with you that creativity can come in so many different forms. So I think that's actually something that I'm going through right now because so much of my identity has been rooted in visual creativity and I suppose the writing as well.
Mhm.
Um, but podcasting is another form of creativity, expressing yourself through your voice, through speaking, through music. There's just so many ways to show what creativity even means.
Mhm. I mean, you just started my book, but ultimately, I believe manifestation is just our ability to co-create with the universe, and it's our job to find the channel in which spirit wants to move through us. So like whether that is visual or our voice or like music or singing or anything, even like being a mentor to somebody. Like our job as humans, as these meat sacks, are supposed to like find the channel in which spirit wants to move through us. That's what manifestation means for me. Um, I know a lot of people are expecting it to be like, I want to manifest my soulmate or $1 million. And I don't think that that's not the case. I just think that we are ultimate like creators here on earth.
I love that. And I agree. And personally, I've been seeing 222 everywhere.
Oh, really?
Like for the past month, like everywhere I look, I'm like 222, 222. And I feel like I was seeing it a lot when I like started dating again. But I also feel like I'm seeing it a lot right now because it is about co-creation. It's
Mhm.
not like um you're going through life alone, you're putting intentions out there through your thoughts. So that's why acknowledging or coming into awareness of what your subconscious thoughts are really important because that then creates the thought form that then creates the action.
Mhm.
So getting aligned with your true intentions of what you want to manifest, I think is the very first step.
It totally is. And there's such a huge part about surrender in there and allowing the universe to set everything up for you so that when you see the synchronicities, you take action because it makes you feel good to take the action. I think we got it all whacked up because capitalism makes us think that like we have to work hard to make money, like time traded for hours. And I've just completely divested from that idea. And I think if more and more people understood that, like capitalism itself would just crumble and we would literally have a better society where we would just create what we wanted to create.
I
Great.
agree. So what would your ideal world look like?
My ideal world, so these are some questions I asked myself in the last 3 years since 2020 was like there are just some basic facts that we know as humans, right? Like we need water to drink, we need food to eat. People with periods need like period care. Like these are just things that are nature. So why aren't these things for free? And to my understanding, that they were at one time. Like food was readily available. Um, and that just like thinking about all of that makes me like think like we're just living all wrong. We're not living according to the cycles of nature because of greed and power and capitalism. We need water to survive. Why isn't that free? Why is it that there's still places in the United States, which is the richest country in the world, doesn't have access to clean water? Like just certain things like that I just started to think about. And in at one time, all of the trees in the United States were female trees because female trees have the fruit to bear fruit, right? Because the fruit is the vulva, but they changed all the trees to be male trees. And so that's why all the trees produce pollen, and pollen is semen. It's like tree semen, which is why everybody has allergies. So
Mhm.
it's like things like this you learn, and I learned all of this on TikTok University. Like I didn't know any of this stuff, but the more you learn about the way it could be and how things used to be when we lived in right relation with the people, the indigenous people, and the land. It doesn't have to be this way. And I believe like each of us was born to be able to be safe and free and decide what we want to do with our day. Like, why is it that we have to wake up and work to live?
Mm.
Why? Like, what is that? Like, who decided that? Why can't we just wake up and enjoy life? And people used to say to me, "Oh, that's your reality. That you're just like you're not like you're lazy, you're not serious." But like why did we come as like spiritual beings into this human form to work?
I suppose we do come to work, but in a different way.
Yeah, I think work, the word work for me is different because I do believe we come here like the sixth and tenth house in astrology. Like we come here to be of service. We come here to do our purpose. We come here to do what's meaningful to us. But for me to come here and sit in a cube and let my soul die, like I don't believe that's why we came here, personally.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I feel like the word work is so loaded
Mhm.
with so much meaning. And also like hard work, and that things have to be hard. And so I kind of feel like if
Suffer.
you agree with like your soul agreed to come back at this time for whatever reason to clear karma, to fulfill your purpose that you agreed to in this lifetime, to heal ancestral trauma, all that stuff. I suppose it's much more about evolution and to evolve. And I think part of that process too is like what a lot of people are calling like waking up. So, you know, the matrix of society and cubicles and working in corporations and whatnot, I do feel like more and more people are like, well, that doesn't satisfy my soul. Like, what does my soul want? Like, does my soul want to have my feet on the ground without any shoes on in the grass? Do I want to feel the sunlight on my face? And I think part of it too is like realizing the simple rewards that life has to offer versus like the attainment of status and monetary gain, which I think we were taught from a young age because that also is very tied into like survival instincts of having to work, of having to make money, of having to do all this stuff. But I suppose, if you flip the script, or if you think about the cup being more full, um I think gratitude has a large like play in this. So if you're grateful for something small like the sunlight being on your face, I think that tends to almost be like you can stack up gratitude coins,
Mhm.
and then that can be not necessarily like a physical attainment, but it's more about your spiritual self, feeling fulfilled. And I very much am a believer that inner reflects outer. And so when people take care of themselves in that way of being grateful for the little things, I think that can result in more monetary gain and more abundance and more freedom in their time and lives.
Mhm. And I think it's tied to what you said about ancestral healing because, like you said, your parents were refugees and my parents were immigrants. And I think their reality was like survival, right? Whereas, like, I feel like us being first generation children of refugees and immigrants, like, we decided to come here to stop that karma, like that chain of scarcity, of lack, of just literally dysregulated nervous systems to survive, and like look at all the stuff that you've been able to do. You've been able to do something that you love, and I've been privileged enough to leave my corporate job, but I think that's because we came here and decided like I'm not gonna repeat these patterns from my ancestors. Fun.
Fun comes with challenges and tests. But if you're ready for that on the other side, I feel the difference of, I think, just overall feeling more confident in myself. But because I've done the inner work and I'm not as easily swayed by my external surroundings, but I will say that, for many years I isolated myself, creating decks and creating I guess Mystic Mondays and building Mystic Mondays. So I think, I was actually telling a friend this the other day because she's kind of going through just searching for herself. And I just encourage, like, if you do need to take time away from your friend group, and if you do need to take time away to just be by yourself, like, why not? Like, or, introduce yourself to new groups of people. Because sometimes when you surround yourself with the same groups of people, they just reinforce your bad habits,
Mhm.
especially when you want to break out of them.
Mhm.
So I know me personally, I definitely went through an isolation period for many years. And I, it wasn't easy, but I'm grateful for it because I do feel like a stronger resonance in myself. And so if anyone needs that, I would just like encourage them to take all the time they need, because healing isn't linear, because sometimes things from the past comes up, and maybe not even your past, like
Mhm.
ancestors, can come up, like generational trauma can come up, and that can be very heavy and can, just it can damper your mood. And so part of this building the resilience is tapping into the existing tools that you have readily available to you. It's like building a muscle. Like, the more you do it, the more comfortable you get. And I think ultimately we all just want to trust ourselves. I
Mhm.
think that's actually one of the strongest, most powerful things you can do for yourself, is to access your own wisdom. So instead of looking to Instagram or social media or whatever on how you can do something, which is helpful. Like, I sometimes Google or YouTube like a tutorial or whatever. Um, but it's more about accessing your own autonomy in your decision making.
Mhm. Which goes perfectly with this year's astrology because, like I mentioned, there's going to be two new moons in Aries this year. And so the first one is on March 21st at 00 Aries, and then the second one is in April at 29 degrees of Aries. So it's like hitting like the whole entire spectrum of Aries from 0 to 29. But then we have eclipses in Aries this year because the North Node will move into Aries. And if I could just make a prediction, I just think like when you have these kinds of activations in one sign, it just means that that energy is more pronounced. And so I think a lot of people are going to turn towards themselves, maybe even become entrepreneurs, become more autonomous, leave their relationships because the South Node is in Libra, and maybe like, find their own authority, their own agency within themselves. And it just so happens that people with placements in Aries already understand this energy. But I think more, and Aries is also, for me personally, I think it's a creative sign. And I think more people are going to tap into their creativity to create something different for themselves.
Yeah, and Aries is also the first sign of the zodiac. So I feel like there's a lot of like initiation, a lot of I would say like exploration and inventiveness. Um I think the theme is also to follow your curiosity and like the spark of whatever that is, because Aries is also a fire sign. Because I think a lot of people don't know what they want to do, and to not get discouraged by that, but instead get curious about, oh, this thing makes me feel excited, or like, oh, I don't like this thing, and just using that as feedback and not necessarily as judgment, because I think it's easy for us to be like, that was good and that was bad, but instead of doing that, you could just kind of like rate it like from 1 to 10 for feedback for your own life, you
Mhm.
know?
I love that experimentation. Like, just try different things to see if you even like it. Maybe even get out of your own rut, right?
Exactly. Because I kind of feel like what can, and I've definitely fallen into this of just like what can hold people back is just the expectation for it to be a bigger thing than it has to be, or
Mhm.
like not even taking that first step because of what it's supposed to look like.
Mhm.
And instead of looking at how it's supposed to look like, instead, I think like exploring what it feels like.
Yeah. I could come up with so many good examples because, again, I'm an Aries. Like when I decided to move to, and you've moved to the West Coast too. Like I moved to San Diego for my actual, like I was in a doctorate program, and so many people are like, "Oh my God, like you're moving across country," and I was like, if I don't like it, I could just come back. And then when I quit, every time I've quit my job, people will be like, "Oh my God, your 401k." And it'd be like, if I really want to come back, I'll just come back or find another job. Like, I don't know why people think it's like a forever decision when it's really not.
Yeah, there's so much fear attached to change.
Yeah.
And I remember not before I even got a job offer to LA, like I would just I started planting the seed, and I remember, I think my aunt or my mom or someone, they were like, there's hills out there. Like, so what? So what if there are hills out there? There's hills here, you know? Yeah. So
Hills?
yeah, hills.
Out of everything, the hills?
I know that was the thing that I'm supposed to be afraid of, I guess. But whatever, I moved out there anyway. I kind of feel the same, in that just giving yourself permission to change direction is
Yeah,
like such a,
pivot.
yeah. It's not
Like,
like the end all be all.
no, and you don't have to like marry yourself to any just one thing. Maybe that's my Sagittarius rising, like talking here, because I'm just like, I'm just gonna try, and if I don't like it, pivot, pivot. Like, it's not a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, my Gemini is rising. My
Oh,
rising
another
Gemini.
mutable. See?
Yeah, and so I totally am with you there on following your curiosities. And I also feel like just overall, I think it's maybe difficult for people to express their multi-passionate selves,
Mhm.
because you can be into cooking and you can be into design and you can be into music and whatever, whatever. And I feel like even like how people curate their grid, it's like very curated to like the one thing that they do. But what if you don't want to do that one
Oh
thing?
my God, I cannot like relate to that at all because my TikTok and Instagram is just like a smorgasbord of like random stuff that I like.
But that's real. That's like what a real person
I'm
looks
like,
like.
niche? What's a niche?
Yeah. I suppose wellness is a niche.
Yeah, but it's like I feel so trapped if I'm just speaking about astrology or if I'm just talking about manifestation. Like, I love movies and I love music and I love live concerts, but I also love history and I love talking about activism, as you can tell. Like, I'm very passionate about like making this world a better place and decolonizing work. And there's just so many things that I'm interested in that I feel um the algorithm favors a niche, but I'm just like, fuck this. I'm just gonna talk about everything.
See, I think that's the Aries coming out, that rebellion, you know.
Fuck this. Well, I do have an Aquarius moon, which is pretty rebellious, I have to say.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Although I feel like I had some of that energy, like definitely when I was younger, maybe like teenage years.
Mhm. But we definitely have some synastry going on because um my moon is near your north node because you have a north node in Aquarius.
Yes.
So I think we were meant to meet in some destined way.
Amazing. I
Over
love
the
that.
internet.
Oh my God, so
So
Aquarian.
Aquarian.
Also, we're talking about like ideologies and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, humanitarian. That's so Aquarian.
And all the things. I know. You asked me like if I related to my moon, and I think like an Aquarius moon, I'm like so passionate about humanity and making this world a better place. Sometimes because it's a fixed air sign, I know like I get very fixated on these things. So I'm like, but it could be so much better.
That's true. I always think of Aquarius signs as like a special little alien,
Totally. Totally.
which
Like,
I love to talk about.
so was there anything that you wanted to talk about that I didn't ask you or that you wanted to share?
Well, I did start reading your book, and I did want to share that something I appreciate is you inserting your life experiences as a woman of color
You.
in the
Thank
book. And I feel like there's a really great mix between like East meets West, you know? And I really appreciate that perspective, and I'm really excited to read the rest of it.
Thank you. I feel like you could relate because obviously being an Asian American woman, there were some things that were a little mixed up in the wiring.
Yes, I can totally relate to that.
But thank you so much for your kind words. The greatest thing that has ever happened to me in the last couple of years since the pandemic was meeting you and like other Asian American women who are in the creative field. But not only in the creative field, but somebody who's into like spirituality and doing all these like cool things. So I'm just so grateful to know you and be your friend, and thank you for everything that you do and all that you share.
Thank you. I'm really grateful for you too. It's like so special to meet someone who understands this world because we're like speaking a special language. You know,
Are.
meet someone that knows these terms, and like there's like a it's just like a click in a natural bond. So I'm also
There's,
super grateful to have you in my life. And yeah, you know, Aries sisters, but also like our birthdays are like we're early Aries, so there's also like vibe, you know.
yeah, I was just gonna say it's really rare to find somebody who like are at the intersections of all your identities, like Asian, woman, American, into spirituality, into astrology, into tarot. And it's like when you can meet somebody with all of those, it's like a very fun time. Aries, right?
Yeah, totally. All the things.
All the things. Thank you so much, Grace.
Thanks, Laura.